at the School of Human Resources and Labor Relations. She has her JD from Florida State University College of Law, and she has a PhD as well from Florida State University College of Business. And Angela also brings a unique perspective of having worked in the Florida legislature. Um, and she can touch on that a little bit. But we're going to it's been a very stressful few months for all of us working from home. Um, and we'll let Angela get started.
Good morning, everybody. And I apologize, you will hear barking. I have 9 pets, and some of them are going to figure prominently into today's talk. So yes, I am really glad to be here today. In my previous life, I also worked for state government, and I remember all of the bill analyses that I did working for agencies such as the Department of Health and Department of Labor back in the 90s when I was practicing law in Florida. So I have kind of an idea of how your lives must be. And I know that it's not easy. But the other thing that you have the extra added layer is that you're doing all of this in a pandemic. So that is something I didn't have to deal with, particularly when I was, pretty much just starting out my career. But I'm happy to be here today. So the agenda is we're going to talk about working in times of crisis and having those difficult conversations. I know you're dealing with difficult conversations because the legislators that you work for, report to, they're under stress. The constituents aren't happy right now, I'm sure, because we're in a pandemic and, they call their legislature. And so we're going to talk about those types of issues. We're also going to talk about how to work effectively in teams and how to manage your own accountabilities such that you are at your maximum efficiency without taking away, like as my 14-year-old daughter, a little piece of your soul. You have all of these different factors that are pulling you in different directions, and we're going to talk about ways to manage that. In addition to caring for your mental and your physical health while working from home. So these are stressful times. I don't have to tell you that. We're in the middle of a pandemic. And, experts knew a pandemic would come, but it still took most of us by surprise. There's a show called Earth 2100. It was done in 2009. I don't know if any of you all have seen it. And it was really good. It had all of these experts predicting what would be like worst case scenario. Like, for example, if we had like a pandemic and if we had like a massive like fires and if we had like riots going on, and who figured prominently in the show is Dr. Fauci, and that was 2009, and it came on ABC, and you can see it on YouTube, Earth 2100. But still, most of us didn't really see this coming. And then, of course, the pandemic has the issue of having go into a recession, and just all the highlights of going on in 2020 with George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, and the notions of the Black Lives Matter movement, and the notion that people are thinking about issues of social justice, there's social unrest, there have been riots. And so that's really making people think, like, wow, what's happening? 2020, no one expected this. Our new normal is always changing, and that can be stressful too, because particularly those of us who are from the United States. My parents aren't from the United States. My parents are from Panama, which is a pretty stable country in and of itself. But in the United States, we're used to a lot of stability. I mean, it doesn't really make, in general, that big a difference to most of our day-to-day lives. For example, like what political parties in control, in the sense that in some countries, if the other political parties in control, like they commit genocide on someone, and we're used to that when we flip the light switch, we have electricity, and we're used to the fact that when we turn on the tap, water comes out of it. Some places don't have that. So we are privileged living in the United States, but what is a downside of that privilege is that when things get crazy, we may be less able to be as resilient when it comes to that, because we're not used to living in crisis all the time. And so, we have a very low tolerance for change, but we've had to learn how to be flexible in a really short period of time. So let's talk about stress. Stress, it is not that bad sometimes, but you need, and we're going to talk a little about that a little bit later, but we have different types of stress. You have acute stress. Acute is short term. You have a project that's due that just came up, or some type of big emergency. That's acute. So that's like the beginning of the pandemic. And we're like, holy crap, what are we going to do? Like, how am I going to get groceries? I can't find toilet paper. Those are things are acute. They're short term. It's immediate reaction. Then you have the chronic stress. That is the long death by 1,000 knife cuts. It's long term, is reaction to an ongoing situation, and that can really wear people down. In actuality, most people respond better during acute stress because you're in that fight or flight response. The adrenaline kicks in, you're trying to think about survival. But the chronic stress, when you start to think about it, like, wow, we're living in a pandemic. Wow, I don't know the next time I'm going to be able to travel. Wow, this is really, really hard stuff. That is actually the more dangerous to people's well-being. And we are in the chronic mode right now, because we are how many months into this pandemic? 7, 8 months into this pandemic. And this is like when people are really starting to feel worn down by this. So you may ask yourself too, why are you feeling so stressed? Well, stress is not always a bad thing. You may say, Angela, how is that not a bad thing? How is stress like sometimes good? Well, you need some stress to be motivated. And so we in psychology, because I got my degree in a business school, but I am an organizational psychologist. That's what I studied in the business school. We know that you need some stress to motivate you. If you didn't have stressors upon you, you wouldn't get out of bed in the morning. You wouldn't, if you wouldn't finish things if there weren't deadlines. You wouldn't, even like, for example, just doing just the day-to-day things that you have to do, you have to have that sense of motivation. So you need that, and that goes up here to motivate you. But at some point, once you hit that optimal arousal, that optimal stress point, your performance is impaired because your anxiety. You're stressed out. You're being pulled in so many different directions. And we call that Yerke-Dodson law. So why are you stressed right now? Well, a bunch of things. We're living in a pandemic. And the notion that you are dealing with things like people who are calling in because, like, I guess at the beginning of the pandemic, probably not as much now, but then I don't know. Oh, I can't file my unemployment because there's so many, I can't get through the website. I can't get through. And you have people who are unhappy right now. And you're working for people who are under a considerable amount of stress. And then sometimes you have to have these conversations, for example, with a constituent, and they're difficult conversations because you can't always give people the things that they want. But give you an example, I was a administrative prosecutor for the Florida Department of Agency for Healthcare Administration. And what happened is I used to prosecute bad docs. And I remember there was a doc who was accused of sexual harassment. And what this person did was he turned in his license, and he also pleaded no contest in the criminal case. And I remember the victim was really, really mad at me because she said, you know, you didn't get him to say that he was sorry. And I said, I can't force him to say he's sorry. He's going to go to jail for the maximum amount of time. He gave up his license. There's nothing else more. But she was like, what I wanted for you was an admission that he did something wrong and that he was sorry that he did it. And having that conversation with that was like one of my constituents. It was difficult to have because nothing that I could do for her at that point could make her happy. So there has been a lot of good research on how to have difficult conversations. And we like to call this the ILETS model. So when you're talking to someone, you have the introductory types of things that you talk about. You set the stage of like, we're having this phone call to discuss X, but then you listen. You listen to the person and you try to listen with a level of empathy. And when you empathize with someone, that doesn't mean that you're internalizing what they feel. Matter of fact, that can be very unhealthy for you. And we're going to talk about later why that it's meant that how that it can be unhealthy for you if you internalize their own feelings. But you think, from their perspective, I see how this would be frustrating, and you let them know that you can see why this can be frustrating. Like, I can see why this is bothering you. Or if I were in that situation, I would be upset as well. Words like that we found have been very de-escalating for people. And then you let them talk. Sometimes they just want to talk. And then through that conversation, you suggest, so based on what you said, what would you like to see the outcome? And knowing the constraints that we're in, what would you think that I should be able to do for you? And oftentimes people come to a realization that, wow, you're right. I can't get this guy to admit guilt. There's nothing that you can do. You can't physically force him to do that. So a lot of times people come around to finding their own solution, but it requires you to have the patience to be able to get them through that process. Unfortunately, patience requires time, and I know that you all oftentimes don't have a lot of time. I'm going to switch gears now because something else that I was asked to speak about was the idea of high functioning, high performance teams and team effectiveness. So let's talk about teams. You all work in teams to a certain extent, but we have to ask, is a team really needed? Sometimes having a team actually slows things down. And so you should be very cognizant of what duties, what projects need to be done in a team versus not being a team. And I know that you all don't have complete control over what you do because we all have bosses, but we're going to talk about negotiating accountabilities later. And one of the things you can try to negotiate is whether this is best done by a team or whether this is best done by one person. Another aspect of teams is effective criteria. That means how much the team members like each other. And you know what? You're not going to always like people that you work with. You know that. So what can you do to make it so that your team don't get blocked by not liking other people's point of view, their personality, or things like that? Once again, try to practice empathy and trying to get from their perspective. The other thing is not to internalize any type of criticism that people have for you, because sometimes there are people that you just can't change, and you can't change the way they think. And maybe it's not even your responsibility to change the way they think. Knowledge criteria. When you're thinking about the ideal people to work with, you want to have a team, which is like a Thanksgiving dinner. You want to have your turkey, you want to have your cornbread, you want to have your stuffings, you want to have whatever. You want to have people who complement. And think about that when you're developing your teams as well. You don't need two people who are great at crunching numbers if you can substitute someone out who can work better, who has some knowledge that is missing from that group. And then the outcome criteria. What is your outcomes that you're trying to see? Realize? How do you hold each other accountable? How are outcomes measured? Those are things that should be really discussed up front with the team so that everyone is on the same page. Once again, a lot of times we put things in teams because it's a diffusion of responsibility. People feel like, well, there's someone else maybe possibly to blame if if you have someone else in the team, but you shouldn't always default to teamwork. But that's not to say that you don't get good value sometimes from working for teams. And the notion of having team members lead various aspects of a project. When you're working on a project, you should definitely have someone who's on point for certain deliverables. And then think about how you hold each other accountable. Do you have weekly meetings? Do you have check-ins? Do you use a shared document where everyone can see everybody's work? Of course, when you work on a team, you want to make sure, this is very important, that whatever someone contributes to the team is identifiable. Because if it's not identifiable, you have a couple of things that happens. You have a diffusion of responsibility. People are like, oh, I don't really care. It's not really my issue. It's kind of like when you pass a pot around and people to do something and people just throw money in there, but no one knows how much the other person throws in. And, it's a situation where if people don't know what you've contributed, people may have a tendency to contribute less. Another type of accountability is to be able to explain what you're doing and how what you're doing creates value for the team. And also realizing that being accountable means that you're accountable to the entire team's success and helping someone else who is not as, who may be struggling on the team. So there's some factors that affect team effectiveness. And one of them is synergy. That's like when you get into the flow. That's like when you get into the dream team. That's when I get my chocolate and the other person's peanut butter and make it together and make a Reese's peanut butter cup. And they taste so much better than the two other things individually. And so you have people have diversity of talents, diversity of skills. You have knowledge sharing. And then you usually have greater goal commitment. But on the downside of working with a team, and you have to make sure that you plan for this, is that the notion of process loss. Anytime and process loss means the time and energy you lose from working on a team. So you have to bring team members up to speed. You have to set up times to meet. You may have a team member who's dragging. You may have a team member who doesn't understand exactly what they're supposed to do. And so you need to go back and, ask them to fix it or fix it for them. So you want to think about designing your teams or working your teams such that you maximize the synergies and you decrease the process loss. And by process loss decreasing, it could be that we don't meet as often, or it could be we use a shared document on Google as opposed to like sending an email draft around, so that we don't know like what version of the draft is this. I was working on a project with some people in the College of Engineering, and we were sending around a draft, and it got confusing because there were like 5 of us working on it. Like, which version are we on? Like, who made this change? So do things to get. I said, you know what? This is not good. This is not a good way of doing things, especially because you're engineers. You all need to be more efficient. We have a lot of process loss. So think about ways you can minimize that. How to be a good team leader. Model the behavior that you want to see. That goes with leading teams. It goes it's also important for leading individual as a parent. It's also good for raising children. It's one thing if you say, well, we want to be on time, but then you're never on time. You need to have clear and frequent communication, but not over communication. But check-ins, and check-ins make people accountable. When they see that email that says, hey, just a reminder, we have one more week on this project to do, that tickles people's mind, that applies that slight pressure, that gets them motivated, something to do. You need to display commitment to the team. If you're a team leader and you seem non-committal, you don't want to be there, that is going to be picked up by your teammates. Also solicit feedback. You don't know how well you're doing unless you get external sources of validation. So your team members may have ideas of how to improve things. And so if you're not soliciting that feedback, you're potentially not being as effective as you could possibly be. And then structure accountability. A good team leader will know the personalities or get to know the personalities of their teammates. And so you need to know, like, for example, is this a type of team where they need to have a lot of hand-holding, a lot of communication, a lot of structure, versus one where they work better when things are a little bit looser, still accountability, but a situation where there's less hovering, less helicoptering. So knowing the personalities of your teammates is really important as far as how to structure your accountability. So something I really want to talk to, and people have asked me a lot to talk about this lately, is the notion of thriving and surviving in a remote environment. So, the joys of working from home. So as I work with you, speak with you now, I'm sure you hear my dogs barking. I have 4 rescue dogs, and I have my rat. He's right here in the cage next to me. You can't see him, but he has a little bit of a respiratory infection. I took him to the vet a few days ago. He's making little squeaky noises. It's like I have my 14-year-old who comes in, who's going to school, and she's dual enrolled at MSU and in high school. She got her smarts from her dad, apparently. And she's like, Mom, can you help me proofread this email before I hit submit? But there's still the good stuff. There's no commute. There's a relaxed dress code. I actually have like respectable clothes today, but usually I'm working in my yoga pants. There's a cost savings. You don't have to commute. Plus, there's more time with your family and your pets. That right here is Sandy. She's my soulmate. I'm in the doghouse with my husband because I've spent over $10,000 this year on her cancer treatment. Oh, and I have to show you this just because this is the type of person I am. I went on Etsy and I got a doll recreated out of pictures out of her. There's an Etsy artist who did that, including her white face and the spot on her leg where she had her cancer treatment. So I got that last week, and that's my new favorite thing. So I get the warmth and the love of Sandy. And we know that when you are working from home, that being around your pets can be energizing. Seeing your family can be energizing. But it's not all good. So Arnold, I should have given you a heads up. There's another Arnold in this presentation, and that's my Arnold. Actually, that's my husband's Arnold. If my husband could divorce me and marry Arnold, he probably would. That's the Barky Beagle. Beagles were bred to be hunting dogs, and he barks at everything. I love this picture here because it looks like Arnold is ready for a Zoom meeting. And this is a picture from last Christmas with Arnold and the portrait I made of him. I got this online so that he in a nobleman's outfit, and I gave that to my husband. But Arnold barks all the time. So I'm on these important Zoom calls, and it's like no matter where I go in my house, I can't get away from the sound of Arnold barking. So that's a stressor, right? That's a stressor. And then there's the other such is that, they're household chores to do. And sometimes when you're working at home, it's like, oh my goodness, okay, I'm just gonna like wash and I'm going to fold this laundry right now. It's just staring at me. The laundry is looking at me and literally judging me. And so there's that tension. Also, the poor ergonomics and workspace. A lot of us are working at kitchen tables, dining room tables. Where I'm working now, to get to the most quiet place in the house, I'm in our spare bedroom on the second floor. The dogs are in the basement. So yes, you literally hear my dogs barking from the basement. But I'm in this little kind of kid-sized desk, and it's not the best for my back and things like that. We're not oftentimes working in the best space. Thank goodness I'm only here for a short period of time because my office is in the basement, which is set up more ergonomically correct. And then you have to deal with the other people who live here, who oftentimes seem like they want to sabotage you. And this actually, I love this video, and this video went viral a couple of years ago, so before the pandemic, but I think it sums up working from home very much so.
Scandals happen all the time. The question is, how do democracies respond to those scandals?
And what will it mean for the wider region? I think one of your children has just walked in. I mean, shifting sands in the region. Do you think relations with the North may change?
I would be surprised if they do.
I'm sorry. I was trying to see a chat. I'll start.
Scandals happen all the time. The question is, how do democracies respond to those scandals?
And what will it mean for the wider region? I think one of your children has just walked in. I mean, shifting sands in the region. Do you think relations with the North may change?
I would be surprised if they do. Pardon me.
That's all right, carry on.
My apologies.
What is this going to mean for the region?
My apologies. North.
So that's the story of my life, it feels like. And what's funny about that was that the study, that it went viral because, many of us weren't working from home. And at that time, or is not as many of us, but it really sums up. It's like, what are you doing? You're trying to sabotage my career. I feel so sad for the mother as she comes in and gets her kids in the look of horror. But I'm impressed by the kid who comes in like that. She's feeling really proud. So it's difficult. It's a stressor. I like the way he remains pretty calm during this, though. So the other thing about it is that Zoom meetings are tiring, right? Why are they tiring? Because there's so many of them, and it's artificial. So as human beings, we have evolved such that our primary form of communication is that we talk, we look in each other's eyes, and we have body language, and we have paralanguage, of course, like how we say that. All of that is changed, muted, distorted when we're doing this virtually. I'm doing some research with people in the College of Engineering who are looking at, we're trying to figure out ways to give people feedback in Zoom meetings if they're losing attention, or if they're talking too much, or if they're not talking enough, and developing some software to do that. But it's a situation that we're like, when you have a Zoom meeting, like, where are you supposed to look? Do I look in the camera? Do I look at a little box? Where do I? It's because it is so artificially contrived. It's harder for us because we have to use more of our cognitive resources, and as such, it is more fatiguing. We also need to pay attention more. It's harder to get certain little cues and things like that. Even though we are seeing the person, it's very different. There's studies that show that we don't even pick up on the same energy as a person is displaying if we're not in the same room, but we're seeing them. And by energy, I don't mean any metaphysical or like new wave type of energy. I don't mean that, but the energy that our body is producing, our movement, we get really subconscious cues from people, just how they're moving and twisting around and things like that. And that's lost in the Zoom meeting. Also, we concentrate more on how we look and sound. So I don't like doing this Zoom meeting through this laptop, but the reason why I'm doing it is because my desktop with the 2 screens and the camera that has the filter that makes my 50-year-old skin look flawless is down in the basement. And I don't want you all to hear Arnold the Barky Beagle. So like, I'm thinking like, wow, like, how do I look? How do I sound? And that's even more magnified now on this laptop. And so we concentrate on that, and that can be distracting as well. So how do you make virtual meetings less tiring? Turn off your camera. There's studies that show that if you turn off your camera and just listen, and when I don't mean just listen and watch cat videos or just listen and, you know, like, I know, take a nap and people can't see that your eyes are closed because you're taking, because the camera's off. I mean, just listen, that you actually sometimes can have a lot higher quality meeting and understand and contribute more because you're concentrating on what's being said. Schedule breaks between meetings and have meeting-free days. It was so awesome. I had a meeting-free day a few days ago, and it just felt like I had hit the lotto and lost 15 pounds. It was like, wow, I'm not staring at a screen all day, because Monday had 9 hours worth of Zoom calls, and by the end, I was toast, right? And avoid multitasking while in virtual meetings. I know that it's tempting to answer that email or to finish up that report, but actually the researchers out there, and I'll be honest, there isn't a lot, but the researchers out there suggest that that actually is more fatiguing than when you just concentrate on what's being said. And then some days, you know, you might have to have a meeting, but don't do a video conference. Do something, oh, I know this is going to sound really weird, but have a phone call. Have a phone call. And, you know, you can get that same amount of information, but not have to be in the tiring, overly taxing environment of Zoom. So I'm going to switch topics again and talk about managing accountabilities. So if you were a nerd and you were to go to Google Scholar and you would type in felt accountability, employee accountability, I would be one of the first people to come up. So this is my thing. And it's like about how do you manage your accountabilities? I've been studying this for about the past 20 years. So let's talk about human beings. Human beings are messy, or the term that my 14-year-old daughter used to say when she was little, they're squiggly. It's hard to pin people down. And so there are no laws of human behavior. There's no E equals MC squared. But if there's something that was going to come close to that, it would be goal setting. And goal setting says that if you give people specific hard goals and let them participate in making them, you have a couple of things. You have higher self-set goals and higher performance. So engage in goal setting with your boss, but also engage in goal setting with yourself. Figure out what you want to do and include your boss in there. And so that's very important because it goes into negotiating your accountabilities. There's certain aspects of your job that you may not like, but if you are on a team, you may be able to negotiate such that the things that you don't like to do or the things that you're not as good at, you may say, okay, I would really prefer not to do that. And instead, I'm going to do this. And it's something that I enjoy and something that you excel in, and you can start becoming the team expert on that. And we call that job crafting, when you negotiate your responsibilities at work such that you concentrate more on the things that you enjoy. You take away things from other people that they don't enjoy, maybe as a trade-off, and then you craft the job into what you want. And in the resources slide, which is my last slide, it talks about how to job craft. There's a link. How to craft your job to improve your employee wellness. So that's a really cool article that I suggest you look at. Learn how and when to say no. It's hard. Many of us have been socialized from the time we were children not to say no. We want to be people pleasers. Plus, the reality is that you all work with important and powerful people. And sometimes it may be hard to say no to that demographic. And you know what? Maybe that demographic is not used to hearing no a lot. But there's the right way to say no. And it's a situation like, I want you to do this by tomorrow. Sometimes you have to explain. We call it legitimizing. Let me tell you why I can't do this tomorrow. This is a level priority of maybe a 3, but I have things that are like 10 and 12 priorities that really need to be done now. So that gives them an idea like, oh, you really can't get that done. Okay. And so you try to figure out a good idea of what is achievable and what is not achievable. Engaging in time management. First thing, every week, you should have your goals for the week. And every day, you should have your goals for the day. And you may not meet those goals, but at least you can set up a plan. You know, things come up, weird things come up. The other thing is that you should do a time management sheet. And I have one that I use for students, but I've also noticed that it's really good for people who are out in the workplace too. And so I will send that along and you can modify it, especially the last page. And it shows like how much you keep a log of how much you spend doing certain things and how much time you have allotted for it. And a lot of times people realize, ooh, I waste a lot of time doing X when I could really like shore that up. Delegate. We don't like to delegate oftentimes because we lose control. But the extent that we can delegate, it can develop other people, it can take things off our plate. And if you delegate responsibly, that's a really good skill set to learn, especially as you emerge to be a leader. Another thing, if you have multiple people that you're working for or multiple people that you're accountable to, sometimes you need to get them all together in one room and say, hey, you know, or one meeting, I guess we're working virtually, most of us, and say, you know what? I want you to all be aware of the things that I have to do. And so I would like for, you know, these are all of my responsibilities. And I want to like map out what I need to do. I know that you want this for me on Tuesday, but this other person wants this also for me for Tuesday. That's impossible. And then have the people that you're accountable to discuss like how they're going to best allot your time for you to get things done. And lastly, I'm going to talk about taking care of yourself. You got to take care of yourself. These are crazy times. And I apologize that I saw a typo on my first slide that addressed this. Create a work schedule with regular stop and start times, right? I know that sometimes emergencies come and you work for people who might say, you got to get this done right now. And you may be tempted to just like, you know, constantly checking emails, but soon you're going to burn out if you do that. You need to create an official workspace at home and keep ergonomics in mind. So you want your eye level to be right with a monitor, particularly if you're using a desktop computer. You may need to put a couple of reams underneath the monitor to get it the right level. For your back, you want to sit upright with your feet flat on the floor. You want to take regular breaks, but regular breaks to take a walk around the block or to stretch. But limit mixing work and household responsibilities, because then it's hard to disentangle work from home, okay? And then think about what you're eating and getting regular exercise. A lot of people have put on that COVID-15. I've actually lost a lot of weight during the pandemic because I haven't been hitting all my restaurants and all my drive-throughs like I did before. But the notion that, you know, there's a mind-body connection, and if you're not taking care of yourself, it will affect you, physically and then mentally. So, staying mentally healthy. You need to educate and have a discussion to the people that you work with at home, children, roommates, partners. Working from home doesn't mean you're on vacation. My parents live with us. My parents came to visit me when, came to stay with us after I had my daughter 14 years and 9 months ago because I went into cardiac arrest when I was delivering her, and they've never left. They followed me around 3 states, even though they had their own house in Florida, to stay with me. And so sometimes my dad's like, "Oh, you must be off. You're not going in office." Well, I haven't been in office for since March, Dad. And he's 87, but we have these conversations. Working at home doesn't mean that I'm off. Another thing is to get out of the house. And you know, I spent most of my life in the South, even though I spent my childhood in Chicago. I was in Florida and Texas most of my adult life. I've lived in Michigan the first few years, and winters always scare me. But you know, like I'm like, you still have to plan for getting out of the house in the winter, even if it's putting those little grippy things on your shoes and taking a walk around the block. It's not good for you mentally or physically. And remember that social distancing does not mean social isolations. You need to have virtual get-togethers, virtual coffee breaks, virtual pet show. You know, that would be really good. Oh, okay, I can't help myself. I'm gonna have to do a pet show right now. Sorry, I have to, can't help myself. I'll be right back.
And while Angela stepped away for a second, we will open this up for questions if people have some. So go ahead, Angela.
Hey, this is Luca, my rat, in the cage next to me. So see, that woke you up, right? See, her rat. Did you all expect to see a pet rat when you came to this? No, you didn't, right? You did not at all. So things to connect people, to break up the monotony, coffee breaks, a movie watch, doing things like that. Because if you have this disconnect with your family, your friends, and your colleagues, you know, you still need to be networking. You still need to be going to events. You need to virtually. You still need to be doing things like this. This is really important. I'm seeing this with my grad students, many of whom are probably you all's age, because I heard that many of you all are in your 20s. They are having a lot of mental health issues because they feel isolated. So you really need to make sure that you connect, even if you're not seeing people in person, right? And practice self-empathy. We are living in some crazy, crazy times, right? And recognize that you might not be as productive or things may not go as planned. I mean, the technology may fail. And so cut yourself a little slack and some grace. And know that caring for others is difficult. Remember in the earlier slide, I said practice empathy for others, but don't go too far. Empathy in the sense of perspective taking, be able to see their perspective. And I don't want you to not care, because part of your role is caring for, you know, your constituents and things like that. But knowing that if you internalize all that their problems, it will eat you from inside. And there are actually some studies that show that if you practice empathy too much, that it starts to have a reverse type of role, that you start getting angry, and you may boomerang, and you may actually start to dislike the people that you're supposed to care for. And understand acute and chronic crisis. You know, you may say, well, I got this pandemic thing, I got it going. You know, you might have said that in April, but that's because we're still in the acute phase. The chronic phase is very, it's like the death from 1,000 knife cuts. It can be very debilitating. And so you really need to practice self-care and not say, oh, I should have gotten this already. We're like 9-10 months into this pandemic. Show understanding for yourself and others, and be flexible. You might have to do things in different types of ways, but that's okay. And that goes along with being creative. And plan for the long haul. Even though we all hope this pandemic is over soon, it's going to be here for a while. So you need to think about new ways of work, new ways of engaging with your constituents, new ways of just being you. And it's important to familiarize yourself with your employer and community resources, right? Do things like if you need to use your employer's employee assistance plan, if you need to reach out to some support group, avail yourself of that. There's no shame in that. And seek support, whether that support be like an official support group or the support that you get from your colleagues, your family, your boss. Studies have shown that, okay, so forgive this example, but this is a Star Trek one. And I know Star Trek is not as popular as it used to be. So you have the USS Enterprise, right? And the photon torpedoes are coming in. And the captain says, raise shields. And they put the shields, and then the torpedoes don't get them. The shield, that's a buffer. And we also have buffers for stressors, like angry constituents, like there's too much work, like we're living in a pandemic, right? And that is one of the buffers is called social support. And being able to commiserate with people is a way of buffering those stressors, the studies have shown. Studies have shown that women are more likely than men seek support. And support doesn't mean the person is going to do the job for you. It just means that someone who understands what you're going through and who could talk things over with. So make sure you avail yourself of that. And then finally, here are some resources and references, including that article I talked about job crafting. And that's my contact information. Feel free to send me an email. That's my phone number. I'll put my cell phone number up in the chat too, if you want to send me a text message.
Hey, Angela, that was great. It was really, really good. I think one of the most important things that you stressed on today is like checking in with each other. And I think sometimes during this pandemic and people working from home, I don't know that staff was checking in with each other to really see how that person's doing. Some did reach out to me here in the business office, but it's so huge to let people know that others are going through the exact same thing you are. And the demands that are on these staff members to get everything done is really a lot. And to do that from home and all the unemployment issues that we've had over the summer, it was maddening. I mean, we took the phone calls here too in the business office. I just can't even imagine what some of these staff were going through with, 1,200 UI cases, and it was bad time.
I couldn't imagine it. I really can't imagine it. I mean, I thought that my job was unsustainable and crazy 20 years ago, but I wasn't even in a pandemic, right? And it's just magnified like 100-fold. So kudos to you for surviving this. I mean, think about that. You might not have felt that you were on your A game every day, but kudos for you to be able to do this. You're stronger than what you think you are, a lot of you.
Yep, and I think that each caucus has the ability to reach out to all of the members within their caucus and their staff. I mean, it might have to go to a higher level to make sure that these staff are really getting the resources that they need to do their job effectively. Does anybody have any questions?
Questions, comments? Animal pictures you want to show me? Oh, thank you, Linda. Thank you so much for the kind words. And you know what? I always tell people this is not the end of this relationship. This is the beginning. Feel free to email me, to text me, to call me. Sometimes it's good to talk to someone who doesn't work with you, who doesn't work in the same world that you work in. That's why I love to hang out with my colleagues, for example, in the College of Engineering, and commiserate with them. So, and I can give you tips, tricks, resources that I have from my world. And I think that it's good. I think part of the role of what we do at MSU is to reach out to the community. And you're all an important part of the community.
Yeah, thank you very much, Angela. And we would love to have the opportunity to maybe have you come back to the House again, and the Senate, and we'd love to continue the conversation.
Thanks much. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I really do appreciate that, Angela. Making yourself available. Stacy, I think it's going to have you on speed dial a little bit now for as a resource, not only just to come back in these kinds of sessions, talking to staff as a whole, but even as staff reach out to her, it's just another person in Stacy's Rolodex for her to have, for staff to be able to reach out. So again, thank you very, very much for taking your time today. Stacy and Cindy, thank you for arranging this. And thank you to those who attended and sent their comments in. We're going to sign off for now, and we'll be back at 1 p.m. with another COVID-related session, this time featuring MSU faculty and talking about supply chain issues that have happened during the last 8 months. So please join us back at 1 o'clock. Again, Angela, Stacy, thank you very much. And thanks to all of you. See you soon.
Take care all. Bye-bye.